As the aloof top student of the school, I was excellent in both character and academics, gifted in many arts. The kind of model child that others always mentioned with envy. However, until the very last day of my life, I suddenly realized I wasn't the one with the protagonist's halo. The delinquent school bully, Makoto, was actually the true male lead of this world, and I didn't even qualify as a malicious male supporting role. In the original novel's description, he fell in love at first sight with my childhood sweetheart, Willow, pestering her relentlessly. He was the wild and unruly yet charmingly roguish male protagonist. The kind who could melt an ice-cold beauty like Willow, compared to their entanglement and ambiguous affection. I, the childhood friend doomed to die young, was nothing more than the catalyst for their romance. Thus, the flower on the high mountain was dragged down to the mortal world, turning into a love-struck fool willing to live and die for affection. Chapter 1, Reborn. I finally understood this world was a sweet romance novel. The school bully Makoto was the male lead, and my aloof childhood sweetheart girl was the female lead. The ultimate clash between the school bully and the high mountain flower once made readers exclaim, "I'm in love with this." According to the original author's depiction, Makoto was the unruly, carefree, roguishly handsome protagonist, the very existence who could melt an ice-cold beauty like Willow, compared to their ambiguous entanglement. I, the childhood friend doomed to die young, was nothing more than the catalyst for their love. Even though I never liked Willow at all, I didn't even qualify as a malicious male supporting role. As a 3 excellences student, in Makoto's eyes, I was just a pretentious poser. He always looked at me with a cold face and said, "George, what's there for you to show off about? You're just luckier in birth than me. If I ever wanted to study seriously, you'd never beat me." In Makoto's eyes, when I reminded Willow not to hang around him, it was because I looked down on him. Because of Makoto, Willow thought I was narrow-minded and gradually drifted away from me, knowing I could never dissuade her once she fell for him. I grew too tired to care anymore, but fate is often ridiculous. Perhaps Makoto saw me as his imaginary rival. Perhaps my very existence seriously obstructed their relationship. Or maybe I was simply destined to be a stepping stone in Makoto's path of growth. On the eve of the college entrance exam, I died in that dark alley. A heavy midnight rain washed away all traces. And it wasn't until the next morning that my body was discovered. The timing was too unusual. The sudden, mysterious death of an 18-year-old boy quickly made headlines across major media outlets. I died at the age when a butterfly is just about to break free from its cocoon, returning to dust. With everyone feeling sorry for me, no one knew that I died because of Makoto. After offending some local thugs near the school, he was cornered by them in the alley. When he saw me passing by, he called out to me in a friendly tone, as if we were close. After using me to draw their attention away, the cunning Makoto successfully escaped. Before running, he gave me a guilty look and said he'd go find someone for help, telling me to hold on and wait. But in the end, just as those thugs had mocked, he never showed up again. Seeing me alone, the gangsters immediately surrounded me. Their fists and kicks rained down like a storm. I could not withstand them alone. During the struggle, I stumbled backward, my head slamming hard against the stone steps. Blood poured out, soaking the ground. The thugs, terrified, fled in panic, while I sank into eternal sleep, never to wake again. Chapter 2. After my death, I became a ghost. I watched helplessly as my mother fainted from crying at my funeral, and as Makoto shamelessly put his arm around my sister's shoulders. Standing openly before my tombstone, he said he was sorry to me, begging me to forgive his cowardice. Because of my death, Makoto suddenly awakened. He cut ties with his past and began a new life. He quit smoking and drinking, scrubbed away the tattoos on his body, dyed his green hair back to black, and no longer squandered money recklessly. He directly severed all connections with that gang of delinquents. Just like that, the reformed Makoto became a legend on campus. With Willow's help, he began studying diligently. Without a doubt, Makoto was heaven's favored child. In just 1 year, he climbed from the very bottom of the grade rankings to the top 5 in the entire year, a position others could never even dream of reaching. No matter how many years of hard study they endured, under his dazzling protagonist's halo, my death was gradually forgotten. What he gained so easily was something others worked 12 long years to achieve. After the college entrance exam, Makoto and Willow chose the same prestigious university. There, they became the enviable, academic couple everyone admired. My parents, overwhelmed with grief, moved to another city, returning only once a year on my death anniversary, perhaps out of guilt. Every year Makoto sent my parents expensive supplements, trying to lessen his own sense of sin. The year Willow graduated, those thugs were unexpectedly arrested, and the truth about my death was finally exposed. Although she couldn't accept what Makoto had done, she ultimately couldn't leave him. At that time, my sister Alicia had also unknowingly fallen in love with Makoto, while spending time around him. When she learned that Makoto was entangled in the case of my murder, Alicia couldn't accept it and went abroad to study. On campus, when Willow truly lost faith in him, Makoto broke down, kneeling in front of her in tears, slapping his own face while apologizing. Willow, I know it was all my fault, but back then I could barely protect myself. Besides, I fell and passed out. By the time I woke up, George was already dead. Later I interrogated those guys. They said if George hadn't fought back, he wouldn't have died at all. With just a few simple words, he shifted all the blame onto me. After all, the dead cannot speak. After my sister left the country, my parents stormed into the school, demanding Makoto pay the price. But by then, he had already been acknowledged by his wealthy biological father. Returning to the Ito family, with Willow speaking up for him by his side, my parents were like eggs smashing against stone. In the end, they could only leave the school hand in hand, their bent backs full of sorrow and helplessness. In the end of the story, Makoto became the young master of a rich family, flattered and fawned upon by everyone. Even before graduation, Willow married him because she was pregnant, giving birth to a pair of twins, a boy and a girl. Later, he successfully took over the family business, sitting on assets worth tens of billions. Living happily with his family of 4, my sister eventually forgave him too, even sending countless gifts to their family every year. To them, my death was merely a small bump on the road of love. To Alicia, it was just an accident, not Makoto's fault. Other than my parents, no one held onto it anymore. Chapter 3. I was reborn with deep unwillingness. Back to the moment when Makoto first fell in love with Willow at first sight. Willow, wanna head out with me later? I'll take you somewhere nice. Makoto swaggered into the classroom, sat sideways next to Willow in a careless manner, resting his arm on the back of her chair, half encircling her as he spoke. His originally neat school uniform pants were worn ridiculously low, the waistband hanging halfway off his hips. Any larger movement would reveal half of his underwear. Willow glanced at him with disdain, frowning slightly. No need. I'm going to the library with George later to look up some materials. So even at this stage, Willow already showed signs of interest. Laughably, because we grew up together, I still thought I should advise her to focus on studying. I really was nothing more than a meddling fool. Hearing this, Makoto gave me a once-over, whistled frivolously, and teased with obvious implication. So that's the type you like. What if I became like him? The moment he said this, the classmates who hadn't left yet all turned to look at me and Willow, their eyes full of gossip, as if there really was something between us, perhaps afraid Makoto would misunderstand. Willow pinched his arm irritably, her expression serious as she said, Makoto, don't talk nonsense. Makoto shook his head, putting on a look of disappointment. All right then, just a few words from him were enough to make ice-faced Willow change expression so easily. These two really were a natural pair. I didn't care how he harassed Willow, but he had no right to make me the butt of his jokes. Kicking aside the chair, I grabbed the book on Willow's desk and slammed it straight onto his head. Expressionless, I said coldly, I used to think you were just uncultured. Now I see you're simply stupid. Control that filthy mouth of yours. Do you know some words can't be spoken carelessly? In serious cases, the whole school would issue public criticism. If you two want to flirt, don't drag me into it, and don't fucking use me as your shield. What a load of bullshit. After finishing, I ignored the sudden change on Makoto's face, picked up my bag, and left. When I got home, I begged my mother to install surveillance cameras outside the house. In my previous life, I had already sensed that Makoto harbored a strange hostility toward me, a repulsion like opposing magnetic fields. Forever impossible to reconcile. He couldn't stand me. And of course I couldn't stand him either. He pushed Willow away from me, while keeping things ambiguous with my sister Alicia. When I stopped him, he even sent his so-called good brothers to smash the windows of my house. Because of him, my parents once suspected that I was running wild outside, turning into a bad kid. Since he wanted to play, of course I would accompany him. That way, he wouldn't waste his role as heaven's spoiled son. Chapter 4. The facts were exactly as I had expected. Because Makoto was upset, his gang of buddies started wandering around near my house every day, causing all sorts of trouble. When the security camera clearly recorded them throwing stones at my windows, I called the police right away. Since they had injured my mother, and all of them were already over 16 years old, they were supposed to bear criminal responsibility. Soon, those few little thugs were sentenced to short-term detention. Having lost his right-hand man, Makoto went mad with rage. He came downstairs to my building, yelling like a lunatic, demanding that I give him an explanation. "George, just look at this kid. He's obviously not easy to deal with. And his words are nasty. You'd better not go down there." Willow's mother looked at me with deep worry, thinking I had provoked some hooligans. I looked at Aunt Lou, who had always treated me like her own son. I really couldn't bring myself to tell her that it was her daughter, Willow, who had caught Makoto's eye. The two of them were entangled now, and Makoto would eventually whisk her precious daughter away. I still remembered the last lifetime. Willow was notorious for being blinded by love. Knowing her parents disapproved of Makoto, she still chose to follow him to City C without hesitation. Apart from sending back some nutritional supplements and a few hundred yuan for their living expenses every month, she rarely returned. The two elderly parents couldn't even see their daughter's face again, and spent the rest of their lives in an empty house. In a sense, their daughter was practically raising Makoto. Although I promised not to go downstairs, I couldn't help but remind Aunt Lou with a few words. I asked, "Aunt Lou, how's Willow Lou doing lately?" She replied, "She's doing fine. It's just that recently she often giggles out of nowhere, which leaves me quite puzzled." "Did something happen?" She looked at me curiously. I shook my head and said, "Nothing. I was just asking casually. It's just that lately she hasn't been walking home with me much, so I got a little curious." "Don't worry about it." Who would have thought that more than 10 years of friendship between Willow and me couldn't compare to the 2 months she had just spent with Makoto? I stopped there and said nothing more, letting Aunt Lou make her own guesses. When Makoto saw I wouldn't show my face, he kicked the wall hard, then limped away in utter disgrace. Chapter 5. In the end, Aunt Lou discovered what was going on between Willow and Makoto. According to my mom, Aunt Lou found an exquisitely packaged bracelet in Willow's room. That bracelet was a birthday gift Makoto had bought for Willow. It was the thing Willow treasured the most. Even later, when she married into a wealthy family, she still wore that faded, token of love bracelet. My mom said, "You'd better not get into any puppy love. Studying hard is the most important thing. Otherwise your dad will really lose it." Because of this, he was afraid you'd follow the same path and nagged all night yesterday. Your Aunt Lou even cried the whole night and still hasn't recovered. She tugged at my ear, lecturing me sternly. She continued, "Before, we all thought Willow was just a little cold in personality. But now we realize she treats people differently. For that thug, she actually talked back to Aunt Lou and even said cruel words. She completely broke your Aunt Lou's heart." My mom sighed, as if she couldn't understand why Willow had changed like this. At that time, my mom still didn't know that her own daughter, Alicia, was the same as Willow, a girl blinded by love for the same man. She abandoned her parents and forgave her beloved. "How pure, how touching," I said. "Mom, who exactly is Willow in love with?" I pretended to be curious. She replied, "I don't know. She refuses to say anything. Your Aunt Lou plans to go to school tomorrow to ask around." I nodded and didn't speak further. Because of Makoto, Willow, who had always been the obedient daughter, was rebellious for the first time. She was obsessed with making everyone recognize how good Makoto was. In her eyes, the only reason people disliked him was that they hadn't seen his shining points. Willow said, "George, could you help me persuade my parents? They always trust your words the most. Please help Makoto. He doesn't deserve to be misunderstood." I remained silent. I could help anyone, but Makoto was the one person I would never help. I could never forget how he made me take the fall in his place. Even if, like he claimed, it was all a misunderstanding, the fact remained that he had caused my death. In my previous life, my parents had no one to rely on in their old age, all thanks to him. Willow shook her head in frustration, nearly losing herself. Frowning, she said, "George, Makoto already told me he didn't know those guys would come and smash your windows. Since they're already locked up, why can't you just let it go?" I swallowed my anger and asked her gently, "Willow, I'm really curious, why do you like him so much? Like him enough to abandon the playmate who grew up with you, to defy your parents, to throw away your own pride?" She lifted her gaze toward the window and whispered softly, "When I'm with him, I feel happy and free. That's something I've never experienced before. Only he can give me that." "George, Makoto really isn't the way you think. He's just so insecure, and that's why he acts so rebellious." The moment she mentioned Makoto, her eyes softened with tenderness. I nodded with a look of sudden realization and said, "Oh, I see. But what if I just don't want to speak up for him?" My face darkened instantly as I pushed her out of the house. I said, "I just don't like him. Simple as that. Who does he think he is? Does everyone have to kiss his ass? Your mom is right. He's nothing but a useless little thug. If you can fall for trash like him, then you're not much better. And you, a little delinquent girl, dare to teach me what to do? Don't make me laugh. Get lost." I slammed the door shut. From that moment on, my friendship with Willow was over. Chapter 6. Alicia was attending a private school. During the National Day holiday, she came back home, saying she was here to meet an online friend. In my previous life, I hadn't paid attention, but now, I suddenly had a bad feeling. Could it be that the online friend she was going to meet was Makoto? She said, "Brother, what's wrong with you? I just came back and you're already giving me the cold shoulder. I don't remember offending you." She tugged at my sleeve and swayed it playfully. Alicia was still just as clingy as when she was a child back then. She would even empty her piggy bank just so I'd spend a few more days with her during holidays. Once giving me all the 5 yuan she had saved, I took her luggage and, instead of answering, asked her back, "Do you know who that online friend is? A boy or a girl?" She replied, "I'm not too sure, but I get the feeling the person's outgoing. We get along pretty well." From Alicia, I learned that after meeting online, they shared playlists, discussed which movies were worth watching, talked about hobbies. There was almost nothing they didn't share. On the second day of the holiday, Alicia went to meet that so-called online friend, and I secretly followed. When I saw Makoto, dressed in a flashy leather jacket, appear at the plaza, even though I had been mentally prepared, I was still shocked. It turned out Alicia had fallen for Makoto long ago. In adults' eyes, Makoto was nothing but irresponsible. Yet in the eyes of the girls who liked and admired him, Makoto was the epitome of individuality. He lived freely, recklessly, and the rebellious aura he exuded often struck a chord in their hearts, giving them an intense thrill. Just as Willow had said, it was something we boring, honest people could never compete with. Makoto gave Alicia a crystal ball as a gift. After chatting for a long time, the two went to the mall to play airborne go-karts. It was obvious that Alicia was very happy. When I saw them come out, I immediately stepped forward. I frowned and said, "Alicia." Seeing me, Alicia called out guiltily, "Brother." Makoto looked stunned when he heard that. He glanced at Alicia, then at me, studied me seriously, and finally realized. He said, "Alicia, so George is your brother?" I didn't realize at first. Chewing gum. He let out a cold laugh, glaring at me with disdain. Then he put his arm around Alicia's shoulder and said with a grin, "Since you're a brother, let me give you a piece of advice. Don't fucking meddle in other people's business. If people don't like you, don't shamelessly try to cut in. Playing dirty tricks behind the scenes, now that's despicable." Though he never mentioned Willow directly, the loathing in his tone was obvious. He thought I had reported him to Willow's parents out of jealousy. When Alicia looked at me in confusion, I gave her a faint smile. My voice dropped colder as I said, "Makoto, speaking of despicable, sending your little gang to cause trouble while you yourself stay hidden, and then denying everything when it backfires, isn't that despicable? Speaking of shameless, coming from a wealthy family with no worries about the future, yet toying with girls from ordinary homes, making Willow lie, argue with her parents, and sneak out overnight, isn't that shameless? Even so, do you really think her parents wouldn't notice? Isn't that just stupid? As for, I must have struck a nerve, because Makoto's face twisted with rage. He charged at me, grabbed my collar, and tried to shut me up. I didn't flinch. I kicked him to the ground and pinned him down as I continued. "As for what you call love, you really overestimate Willow's importance. You treat her like a treasure, but in my eyes, she's not even worth shit. I never liked her. Stop thinking everyone wants to steal her from you, you're pathetic." Just as I was about to land another couple of punches, a heavy blow struck the back of my head. The sound was dull yet piercing, the force so strong that my vision went black instantly. My grip loosened, and I collapsed heavily to the ground. When I barely regained consciousness, I caught sight of the shattered pieces of Alicia's crystal ball on the ground. Trembling, she reached out to help me up, but I shoved her away. She said, "Brother, I didn't mean to. It was an emergency. I didn't have time to think. Let's go to the hospital, please." Seeing me remain silent, Alicia grew panicked. The air fell into heavy silence. Makoto lay on the ground, clutching his groin and groaning in pain, while Alicia stood frozen, not knowing what to do. I forced myself to stand, every word squeezed out of me. "Alicia, since you like him so much, then you can take him as your real brother, or even as your so-called lover brother. I don't care. From this moment on, I'll treat it as if I never had a sister like you. You're on your own." I pulled out the 5 yuan she had once given me and tossed it onto the ground, then turned and walked away. Chapter 7. By the time Alicia had sent Makoto home, I had already been taken to the hospital. Fortunately, the injury wasn't too serious, just required careful attention and some medication to recover. Because of this incident, my dad was utterly disappointed in Alicia, almost wanting to kick her out of the house on the spot. On the day school started again, Alicia came to the hospital to see me. She apologized pitifully. "Brother, I'm sorry. Please forgive me just this once, okay?" I was about to speak, but then I remembered how, in my previous life, she abandoned our parents for Makoto and went abroad alone. She even called herself the godmother of Makoto and Willow's children, doting on them, which only filled me with anger and disgust. So I shook my head, stood up, and went to the bathroom, my silent way of refusing. Now, with the messy love triangle exposed ahead of time, Alicia completely cut ties with Makoto once she found out he was the one Willow liked. She even brought homemade snacks to apologize to me. I didn't eat them. Instead, I mailed them to Makoto under her online friend identity. Wasn't that exactly the kind of praise and flattery he loved? Since I needed to rest well, I stayed at home for a month. Only after fully recovering did I return to school. It was the most intense period of senior year, and I no longer had the time to pay attention to Willow and Makoto. I only heard that the two of them had been publicly criticized by the discipline director during the flag-raising ceremony because of their puppy love. Soon, news of Willow dating a thug spread everywhere. Even if I didn't want to know, it was impossible not to hear about it. Aunt Lou was repeatedly summoned to school. Makoto, who had no elders in his family, acted completely indifferent. It was infuriating, yet there was nothing anyone could do, except feel sorry for Willow's parents. George, no wonder you don't walk with Willow anymore. Hey, how did it feel being the third wheel before? My desk mate teased, patting my shoulder and looking at me with gossipy eyes. I shrugged and replied, I don't know. Don't care. Doesn't matter. Go ask the people involved. Then I went back to drilling practice questions. These days, I didn't even have time to drink water, let alone worry about whether their romance was sweet or not. They were the male and female leads, blessed by fate itself. Even while dating, they would still get into good universities. But for cannon fodder like me, if I wanted to get what I desired, I had to fight with everything I had. Chapter 8. Willow, come with me. I have something good for you. As soon as the evening self-study bell rang, Makoto ran in with a gift box, grinning, and dragged Willow out. After the two left, a few bold classmates followed them. A long time later, those classmates returned, but no matter how everyone asked, they refused to say anything. On the bus, whether deliberately or not, Makoto kept teasing Willow in front of me, refusing to stop until her face turned red. I said, Grandpa, please sit here. I stood up and greeted an old man nearby, but before the seat could be taken, Makoto plopped himself down instead. He glanced at me with contempt, sneered, and said, so fake. It's one thing to pretend to be a good student at school, but you're even pretending here? Expressionless, I replied. Trash doesn't need to pretend. After all, no one would believe it anyway. Get up. I'll only say it once. Seeing Makoto about to make a move, Willow hurriedly stopped him, saying, Makoto, don't. This is a bus. At Willow's frown, Makoto reluctantly got up and quickly helped the old man sit down. Not wanting to be annoyed further, I walked to the front of the bus to stand. Unexpectedly, my eyes met Willow's. I stared at her steadily, and Makoto immediately blocked my line of sight. Seeing that, I let out a mocking laugh and turned my head toward the scenery outside the window. Knowing that the college entrance exam was important for Willow, Makoto restrained himself a lot and stopped coming around. But I heard he had gathered more gang members outside, and this was why he offended those little thugs. Soon, the day of my accident in my previous life arrived. Afraid of anything happening, I refused to go out no matter what. When my mom asked me, like in the previous life, to go buy a bottle of soy sauce, I pretended to feel sick. Later, I saw Willow leave the house across the street. Watching from the window, I noticed her steps were a bit unsteady. This day was destined to be troubled. When the news arrived, Willow had already been taken to the hospital by Makoto. Her right hand was shattered into pieces, cutting her off completely from the college entrance exam the next day. This outstanding student, once so full of pride, stunned everyone with such a sudden downfall. In the hospital corridor, Makoto squatted in the corner in a daze, eyes empty. When Uncle Lou arrived and saw him, he stormed toward Makoto in fury. If the hospital staff hadn't stopped him, Makoto would have been beaten to death. In the original trajectory of the story, the person who got hurt was different, which changed all that came afterward. Now, seeing Willow lying pale on the hospital bed, Makoto no longer wore the indifferent face he had in the previous life. He gathered his so-called underlings, vowing to make those people pay the price. The outcome was unknown, but Makoto, covered in wounds, did not awaken to reality as he once had. On the contrary, he grew even more reckless. Bars and nightlife became his frequent haunts. He picked up smoking, drank heavily, and got entangled with people from the underworld. On the day of the college entrance exam, as I sat in the exam hall, watching the sun rise after the rain, I finally breathed a sigh of relief for no reason. In this life, I was no longer that ill-fated boy everyone pitied. My future could hold endless possibilities. Chapter 9. The 2 days of the college entrance exam passed quickly. Yet on the very night it ended, I suddenly fell gravely ill, burning with a high fever the whole night. No one knew that I had dreamed of my previous life again. In the dream, Makoto and Willow were camping outdoors with their 2 children, the kids chattering loudly as they called for Dad and Mom. Makoto, now gentle and refined, bore no trace of the thug he once had been. When Willow sneezed, Makoto tenderly pulled her into his arms. The two exchanged a smile, looking every bit the loving couple. The warm, lively picture of a family of 4 was so beautiful that no one would want to disturb it. But then, suddenly, a stranger appeared, heavily wrapped up, his face hidden. He walked straight toward them. It all happened too fast. With a loud boom, flames roared into the sky. The entire family of 4 died instantly in this man-made accident, along with the perpetrator himself. Perhaps this was the true ending of my previous life. Thinking of that, I no longer felt so unwilling. After all, good and evil always have their consequences. Everyone eventually meets their fate. Because of the sudden ferocity of my illness, I was unconscious for 3 full days before waking. The moment I opened my eyes, my parents leaned over me. Their eyes brimmed with tears, though my mom still couldn't help scolding. I told you not to kick off the quilt at night. You wouldn't listen. Now look, you're lying here with an 4 drip. Who do you think is to blame? She poked my forehead in annoyance. I said, "Ah, it hurts, Dad. Your wife's bullying me." I covered my head and pretended to be pitiful. My dad chuckled and said, "You rascal. So rude. You deserve to be taught a lesson by your mom." He chimed in to back her up. The hospital room filled with laughter. This time when I woke, it felt as if the shackles binding me had been lifted. My whole body felt unusually light. Even my breathing became much smoother. Some memories began fading away. At some point, I realized I could no longer clearly recall everything that had happened in my previous life. On the day I was discharged, I went to see Willow in passing. In her ward, she was reading a book, her right hand encased in a thick cast, her movements awkward. Because of Makoto, things between us had become awkward too. When I saw her staring at me silently, I coughed and asked stiffly, "Are you going to repeat senior year?" She answered, then lowered her head, her mood visibly off. She asked, "George, how did you do on the exam? Was it difficult?" Hearing this, I thought seriously and said, "Pretty good. If nothing unexpected happens, I should be able to get into my ideal university." I smiled openly, stabbing her heart with my words as calmly as possible. It was my way of repaying the grievance from my previous life, when she had made things so hard for my parents. Now, since I hadn't been killed, she and her beloved Makoto could tangle themselves up however they pleased. Chapter 10. Because Aunt Lou had deliberately kept them apart, Willow hadn't seen Makoto for 2 days. Before I left, she looked at me hesitantly, clearly wanting to say something. I raised my eyebrows and pretended not to notice. Just as I stepped out of the ward, Willow called after me. With an embarrassed expression, she said, "George, could you please give Makoto a message? Tell him not to blame himself. I've never held it against him." What I said that day was just out of anger. Before she could finish, I coldly refused. "No." Then, noticing Alicia approaching from afar, I shifted the subject with a smile. "But there's someone else who might be more than happy to pass your message along. After all, she has her own history with Makoto." "Brother, Mom and Dad asked me to call you home," Alicia said, speaking to me as if nothing had ever happened. I nodded, pointed at Willow, and said calmly, "She has something to ask you. You two talk. I'll wait at the hospital entrance." When Alicia came out, her face was calm. I couldn't help but wonder if she would go looking for Makoto afterward. At a red light, Alicia asked me, "Brother, do you really dislike Makoto that much? Can I ask why?" I replied casually, "It's not exactly dislike, I just can't bring myself to like him. Some people simply clash in personality. There's no way to coexist peacefully." Seeing her remain silent, I continued, "If you really like him, and want him to be my brother-in-law, then I advise you to move out with him sooner rather than later. And don't bother bringing him to meet our parents. We won't indulge him." "That's also what Mom and Dad think," she protested in a wrong tone. "Brother, what are you talking about? He's Willow's boyfriend. Makoto and I are just online friends," I said indifferently. "Whatever. It has nothing to do with me anyway." Out of habit, she tried to tug at my sleeve playfully, but I avoided her hand. Seeing how resistant I was, Alicia sighed and said no more. On the day our admission letters arrived, I happened to run into Willow and Makoto arguing downstairs. Makoto suspected Willow was avoiding him because she was involved with another man. Annoyed at being slandered, Willow retorted, "Makoto, we're both repeating senior year. Shouldn't we be focusing on our studies? Even though I'm at a different school, we can still review together after classes. Didn't we agree to aim for the same university?" But Makoto, like a wild horse that refused to be tamed, couldn't stand being restrained. He waved her off carelessly, not taking her words to heart, and said with a cocky grin, "So what? School hasn't even started yet. We've got plenty of time. Let's have some fun first. Once classes begin, I promise I'll study hard. I won't go to bars anymore." I'd heard that Makoto had recently gotten a part-time job as a resident guitarist at a bar, very popular with the girls. No wonder Willow felt so insecure. Chapter 11. Because I hadn't died this time, both Willow and Makoto's fates had changed. Willow now had to repeat a year, while Makoto was still wasting his life away. completely without the realization he'd had in the previous life. As the day to report to school drew near, my parents became increasingly reluctant to part with me. The morning before my departure, my mom rushed into my room at dawn, threw her arms around me, and burst into uncontrollable tears. She kept murmuring how wonderful it was, leaving me rather confused. I said, "Help, Mom, you're hugging me too tightly, I can't breathe." Then I added, "Although I've worried you from time to time, at least you raised me this far. If you don't get some return on your investment, it'd be a real loss, so let me live well, okay?" Hearing that, my mom finally stopped being so sentimental. Instead, she pinched my ear and scolded. "Nonsense. Get up already. What kind of child is as lazy as you?" Through my grogginess, I thought I saw her shoulders trembling. After she left, I glanced at the clock and saw it was only 6 o'clock. I lay back down and went back to sleep. When I woke again, my mom had returned to normal, though the corners of her eyes were a little red. "Here, son, eat more. Look at you. You've gotten thinner." My dad filled my bowl with food, his eyes shining as he watched me. I said, "All right, thank you, Dad." Perhaps because of the imminent farewell, my eyes suddenly grew hot, tears dripping into my bowl, leaving me looking rather pitiful. That day, neither of them went to work, saying they wanted to help me pack for school the next day. At night, my dad patted my shoulder and said he wanted a man-to-man contest. Just like when I was a kid, we arm wrestled. I won. But this time, he didn't pretend to lose on purpose. Looking at me with pride, he said, "In the blink of an eye, you've grown so much. Your mom and I are just happy you're safe and sound. George, I don't need you to achieve anything great. As long as you're healthy and happy, that's enough. Remember, we'll always love you." I hugged my dad, tears streaming silently, not even realizing there was something unusual in his words. In my previous life, I had died too early, forcing them to suffer the grief of parents burying their child. Even in this life, I hadn't had much time with them, and now I was leaving again. The next morning, I was startled to find more white hairs at their temples. Since I was attending a university within the province, our family soon arrived at the campus. After settling into my dorm, my mom repeatedly reminded me of all sorts of things. Even though she had agreed I'd come home whenever I had free time, the way she spoke made it sound like I was leaving forever. She said, "Son, take good care of yourself. Don't get sick." Her voice choked as she looked at me, watching their backs as they walked away. I suddenly remembered the scene from my previous life. My nose stung, and I couldn't help but call out, "Dad, Mom." Neither of them turned back. I watched their figures grow smaller and smaller until they finally disappeared from view. Chapter 12. College life was colorful and vibrant. I was busy every day with club activities, so I rarely paid attention to Willow and Makoto's situation anymore. Later, my mom told me that because of Makoto, Willow's grades had dropped sharply. The two of them quarreled constantly, and Willow seemed mentally distracted. One was a foolish girl repeating a year for love, the other a notorious thug from no one high school. Their relationship wasn't nearly as beautiful as in the novels. When I went home for winter break, I ran into Willow at the doorway as she was heading out. Our eyes met, and to my surprise, she greeted me. After all, ever since she got together with Makoto, we had become complete strangers. I nodded back, just about to go inside. When she stopped me, she said, "George, I want to apologize for my unreasonable behavior before. I never wanted to lose you as a good friend." Studying my expression, she continued, "Do you still remember when we were kids?" Unable to listen any longer, I cut her off. "Willow, love requires both sides to give. Friendship is the same. We can't go back." She lowered her eyes and bit her lip. "I'm sorry, I went too far." Willow forced a smile, trying to hide her embarrassment. Her ability to reflect on herself only meant that her relationship with Makoto was having problems. Perhaps this world really did revolve around the two of them, because throughout the entire holiday, I somehow kept running into them arguing. Makoto, unruly as ever, was ambiguous with one or two nameless female classmates, making Willow even more insecure. One day, Makoto blocked Willow's path, impatiently saying, "She and I are just friends, nothing more. Why can't you trust me?" But Willow looked straight at him and said seriously, "Makoto, let's break up." Makoto replied, "No, I don't agree. You said you'd never leave me." Panicking, he grabbed Willow tightly, refusing to let go. Willow frowned. "I said we're breaking up." Her eyes were filled with determination. With her gaze lowered, hiding her grief, she choked out, "My mom was right. We're simply not the same kind of people. You long for freedom, but I want a stable future. I don't like the places you go. These days, we've quarreled countless times, and you always brush me off. I'm exhausted. Please, just let me go." Makoto was undoubtedly proud. Hearing Willow say things so firmly, there was no way he would cling shamelessly. His eyes darkened. He raised his hand and slapped Willow hard across the face, sneering, I must have been blind. Turns out you're no better than the rest. Before the new year had even passed, the two of them had completely broken up, and their fates had diverged drastically from the previous life. After the breakup, Willow devoted all her energy to studying again, which greatly reassured her parents. Makoto, being the illegitimate son of a wealthy family, felt no crisis at all. He skipped class every day to flirt with girls at bars. This time, Willow achieved excellent results as expected. She became once again the so-called model daughter everyone praised. I had thought that the male and female leads might still reunite like in a cliché novel, since that's a common trope, but in the end, Willow went far away to a northern university, while Makoto quickly found a new girlfriend. The two of them truly never crossed paths again. Chapter 13. In my senior year of college, while I was struggling with where to develop my career after graduation, I went for a walk to clear my mind. On a pedestrian bridge, I came across a Taoist priest running a fortune-telling stall. As I passed by, he suddenly called out, "Young man, want to have your fortune told?" I smiled, shook my head, and was about to walk away when I heard him say, "Originally a fate of short life, yet the destiny has changed, truly extraordinary." As he spoke, he stroked a beard that clearly didn't exist, since I was someone who had been reborn. His words made my heart skip a beat. For some reason, I felt as though he had seen straight through me. I stepped up to his stall, pretending to be calm, and said with a smile, "I don't quite understand what you mean, master." "Perhaps you're mistaken," he replied. "Mistaken or not, you know in your heart." Looking at my palm, he continued, "Cause is fixed, fate is variable. According to your original destiny, you should have died at 18. Yet someone used a lifetime's worth of good karma to give you one chance to alter your fate. I don't think I'm wrong." I no longer doubted him. At that moment, I finally understood. I wasn't reborn out of unwillingness. Of course, there are countless people in the world suffering. Why would I alone be pitied by the heavens? He said, "Parents, out of love for their child, plan deeply for their future. From the moment of birth, their love flows unceasingly. Young men, cherish the little time left of your bond with them." With a sigh, he patted my shoulder, then packed up and left. I suddenly remembered, the day before reporting to university, my parents had seemed strange. Rather than saying they were abnormal, it was more like they were my parents from the previous life, coming just to see me one last time. Thinking back to that dream, all my doubts finally had an answer. I smiled bitterly. So it was all because of me. After graduation, I chose to return home. I found a job that wasn't too busy and spent most of my time accompanying my parents. Though they often pretended to dislike it, I could feel they were truly happy to have me by their side. Later, at the age of 26, I proposed to Anna, a junior from the same university. We had been dating for 3 years, and naturally, we ended up together. After marriage, we bought a house across the street from my parents. In those years, Alicia had already been expelled from school due to failing too many courses and hadn't returned for a long time. When we received Willow's wedding invitation, Anna was already 5 months pregnant. The groom was not Makoto, it was said to be one of Willow's colleagues. At the wedding, Willow was elegant and confident, beautiful and composed. The groom's eyes were full of love when he looked at her. Who would have thought that the Makoto she had once loved to death had truly become her past? As for businessmen, profit always comes first. Because he was no longer as outstanding as in the previous life, Makoto had never been brought back to be groomed. Besides, the Ito family now had a new head. How could there be a place for him? In just a few years, Makoto had disappeared from people's sight. All I heard was that after graduation, he borrowed from loan sharks to start a business and failed, fell into the underworld, and got addicted to drugs. He had completely set foot on a road of no return. Chapter 14. When little Tom was 3 years old, my parents' health began to decline. Just as that Taoist priest had said, their bodily functions were rapidly deteriorating. "Mom, if I hadn't been born, wouldn't life have been easier for you and Dad? I always feel like I came to this world just to burden you." I lowered my head, my nose stung, and tears rolled down my cheeks. My mom frowned and said, "Nonsense. You're far more filial than your sister. Without you, your sister would have driven me and your dad to our graves." She continued, "We used to worry about you, but seeing how well you and Anna live now, we can finally feel at ease. Still, fix that bad temper of yours. Don't bully her." Hearing my mom take Anna's side, I rubbed my forehead helplessly and said, "Mom, Anna only pretends to be pitiful in front of you on purpose. How could I ever bully her?" She chuckled and said, I know. So don't talk nonsense anymore. George, your dad and I have never regretted bringing you into this world. We love you very much. I know." After that, I never spoke such discouraging words again. I had always known, deep down, that they truly loved me. Fortunately, companionship is the longest-lasting confession of love, and I remained by their side all along. Extra, Willow. While Martin and Willow were shopping, Makoto suddenly appeared. The three of them ran into each other at the entrance of a clothing store. Looking at the woman he had been longing for all this time, Makoto's eyes turned red. Ignoring Martin's presence, he rushed straight up to Willow and demanded, "Willow, you promised you'd marry me. How come now you've become someone else's wife? What about me? What about our children?" Hearing Makoto's nonsense, Willow glanced at her husband, whose face had turned pale green, and snapped in shame and anger. "What nonsense are you spouting? We broke up 10 years ago. Don't talk rubbish, honey. Let me explain, those kids are absolutely yours. We can do a paternity test if you want." Seeing Willow look at him like he was a plague, Makoto's heart filled with bitterness. Hoarsely, he said, "Willow, things shouldn't be this way between us." Fixing his eyes on Martin behind her, he hinted, "In my memories, you and I were destined for each other. After we married, you gave birth to twins, a boy and a girl. We lived happily. Everything I did for you, and everything you did for me, don't you remember any of it?" Even to this day, he still didn't know who had killed his entire family. What Makoto couldn't accept was that after reliving another life, the world itself had turned upside down. George hadn't met with misfortune. On the contrary, it was Willow who had been dragged down by him. He never made it to university, broke up with Willow early, and the Ito family no longer acknowledged his existence, leaving him to fend for himself outside. In recent years, his life had become worse than that of an animal. Once a high-spirited rich second-generation heir, he had now become a despised addict, looked down upon by everyone. He could never figure out how he had ended up in such a miserable state. The crushing sense of loss made Makoto blurt out a wish to quit the gang, only to be met with a vicious slap from the boss. "Makoto, you're nothing but a dog I raised. Don't you dare have foolish thoughts, or I'll kill you." Having quickly recognized reality, Makoto submitted obediently, only hoping for a chance to escape and find Willow. But when he finally saw Willow again, she was by another man's side. Their intimate gestures made it obvious their relationship was anything but simple. Now, he had nothing, no identity, no status, and not even Willow. He even thought of going to George for answers, since George was clearly the biggest anomaly in this world. But according to Willow, George had moved away, and even she didn't know where he had gone. In this vast sea of people, Makoto had no way of finding him. Perhaps out of sheer unwillingness, Makoto began stirring up trouble. In front of Martin, he deliberately mentioned how he had dragged Willow down, even forcing her to repeat a year of school. He sneered, "Don't you feel like Willow is looking through you to see me?" Noticing that the two of them even shared a slight resemblance in their features, Makoto began boasting shamelessly. Having been her husband in a previous life for several years, he knew Willow far too well. When he mentioned the birthmark on her private body part, Martin's expression instantly darkened. Martin gritted his teeth and said, "Stop talking bullshit. How could my wife possibly?" Makoto cut him off with a laugh. "Why not? We were already fooling around back in high school. There's nothing we didn't try. In fact, I even took her to the hospital." He looked at Martin with a mocking half-smile. Watching the man's back as he left, Makoto held his swollen right cheek, spat out a mouthful of blood, and laughed. Since he had already fallen, why not fall all the way? After all, Willow could only ever belong to him. Perhaps because too many old wounds had been unearthed, Martin, unable to bear it any longer, filed for divorce. A proud man like Martin would never tolerate being fed half-cooked rice. After the divorce, Makoto began pestering Willow, trying to recreate the passionate love from their previous life. One day, a drunken Willow pressed a fruit knife against Makoto's neck, her eyes red as she shouted, "Makoto, what makes you think I would ever piece things back together with trash like you? You really are a cursed star, born to ruin me." It was true back then, and it's true now. "Makoto, can't you just let me go?" On her way to try to win Martin back, Willow was ambushed by thugs Makoto had called, and her leg was broken. Seeing Willow in such a state for the first time, Makoto was so terrified he almost wet himself. He stammered, Willow, calm down, it's me, Makoto. Weren't you the one who loved me most? Give me another chance. I swear I'll change." Willow sneered, her eyes filled with disgust. With a cold laugh, she said, "Love? You're not worthy." Only then did Makoto finally realize Willow truly didn't love him anymore. In such a short span of time, fate had allowed him to experience what it felt like to fall from the clouds straight into hell. After Makoto was killed, when he opened his eyes again, he was back in that previous life where the family of 4 was camping. Just as he was celebrating that it had all been nothing but a nightmare, a scorching wave of heat surged straight toward him. At the very moment of true death, Makoto felt only one thing: this world was utterly rotten. Extra, Alicia. From the very first moment Alicia saw Makoto, she knew clearly that her heart had been moved. It was such a strange feeling, though they had only known each other for a short time. She always wanted to steal a few more glances at him. Later, George's sudden appearance pulled her back to reality for a moment. But soon after, she actually injured her own brother for Makoto. Because of this, everyone said she had gone crazy. Her parents even wanted to drive her out of the house. Afterwards, Alicia insisted it was only an accident. But no matter how hard she tried to make amends, she could never earn her family's forgiveness. When she returned to school, Alicia forced herself to keep her distance from Makoto because of her brother. Even if he tried to reach out to her online, she never responded. In order to pass a message for Willow, and also to clarify her own feelings, Alicia deliberately went to see Makoto. When they met again, he was recklessly drag racing with his gang of hooligans, playing wild and dangerous games. Looking at the noisy, swaggering Makoto in the distance, that feeling of infatuation she once had instantly faded a great deal. It was only then that Alicia realized just how ridiculous her mistake had been. For such a laughable thug, she had actually raised her hand against the brother who loved her most. Ever since they were children, George had spoiled her, calling her little sister over and over, always bringing her the best things he had. And yet, what had she done in return? Covering her face, Alicia let tears seep through her fingers. Later, unable to face her family, Alicia went far away to live in another place, rarely ever returning. When George got married, Alicia, who was still far away, never even received the news. Everyone treated her as if she no longer existed, and indeed, she herself didn't dare appear in front of them. She could only hide in the shadows and watch from afar. She sent countless gifts back home, hoping to make up for her mistakes, but George returned them all. All these years, Alicia allowed herself to drown in the regret of the past, living as a lonely soul, both miserable and pitiful.